No, it's not that bad. So, occasionally I'll have this recurring flying thought that I should sell my RTX 3080 and get some AMD equivalent in power or even an ARC B580 if I'm feeling that desperate. Couple reasons why that's totally unnecessary. Although, if by a miracle anyone watching this, that probably nobody will, is interested in a trade, let me know. Now, me begging for free hardware aside, I'm gonna shoot down that thought because it's actually really not that necessary. Like, this Reddit tier narrative that nvidia is literally unusable on Linux, that your machine will break every single day, that it will explode, your house will be on fire, is straight nonsense. Though, it might have been true at some point, but it really isn't nowadays. So, couple disclaimers. My hardware is very much almost a best case scenario. It being a 30 series GPU is very relevant because starting with the RTX 20 series, and by extension the GTX 16 series, so great naming there, nvidia introduced this new firmware that they call GSP, and that's very relevant for their Linux drivers because they released a new version of it with open source kernel modules. Those are incompatible with any older series, including the GTX 10 series and anything before that. But those drivers are also deprecated on Windows nowadays, so, you know, don't use end-of-life GPUs, please. Anyway, the newer drivers really changed a lot, particularly around driver 560. That, I think, marks a point by the time they really started to lock in with their drivers and not screw around and actually have things be usable. That is when they defaulted to their open kernel modules for GSP firmware cards and later, because those the open kernel modules have been around since driver 515, but they were shipped back then. But then starting with 560, they became the default for consumer cards. And ever since then, it really doesn't make a difference using NVIDIA's proprietary special Snowflake driver versus sticking to open source with some like AMD or Intel. Not so much nowadays, at least. Now, I'll fully concede that at one point, the driver support was not as good, and there might be some weird edge cases. So, again, I have one of the better scenarios because of the fact that I have a GSP firmware card. That and the fact that my monitor is very boring, 1080p, no variable refresh rate, no HDR, nothing special, really. So, I wouldn't know the pains of running HDR, VRR, whatever. That said, that doesn't really matter because, ironically, variable refresh rate, HDR, those were fixed by NVIDIA a while ago. Yeah, no, it feels like a lot of the real complaints that used to be valid have been fixed. And, like, it's not that there aren't any problems, right? Because one annoying one, well, there aren't any real specific deal breakers I could think of. Anything that I could have come up with, HDR, that was fixed. Variable refresh, that was fixed. Those were two big pain points. The daily driving is literally no different versus my ThinkPad, which does not have an NVIDIA GPU. Like, once again, this narrative that NVIDIA is just unusable, and if you own an NVIDIA GPU and you use Linux, your computer will light on fire. That is just straight up nonsense from the depths of Reddit. Like, I swear to God, every single horror story that you'll dig up will be talking about some, oh, I was playing with my Google Snake to furry femboy yams, and my screen started tearing at the money shop because of my NVIDIA drivers. Yeah, it doesn't apply anymore. That probably didn't apply, but that especially does not apply nowadays. Now, to further shoot down this narrative that I'm unfortunately not getting paid for by NVIDIA, my DMs are open, NVIDIA. Let's say you do switch off of NVIDIA and onto AMD or Intel. What do you gain other than open source drivers? Or actually, okay, what do you lose for open source drivers? Not much, really. You only lose small features like CUDA, DLSS, DLAA, NVIDIA Reflex, FrameGen, good compute, good productivity, You know, small things like that. Yeah, so this narrative that it's unusable and that there's no reason why anyone would want to use NVIDIA is retarded. Just gonna reiterate that. Now, not everybody makes use of those things, right? I don't think the average person with an NVIDIA GPU is gonna be writing CUDA kernels. But the fact that you have those, while you just don't for something like AMD or Intel, is just embarrassing. Like, there's a reason why the discussion is unbelievably one-sided if you talk to any Windows gamers. There's no reason to get an AMD or Intel GPU if you use Windows. None at all. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Maybe if there's a really good deal, but if you have a price comparable NVIDIA GPU versus a price comparable AMD GPU versus a price comparable Intel GPU, Intel I think is slightly less fucked as far as features go, but NVIDIA's the most stable. They have the most features. Like, if NVIDIA didn't cling onto their special Snowflake driver, it would be just as one-sided a discussion on Linux too. In general, I just really don't like this bullshit narrative. I don't like it. It's cringe. It sucks. It is not unusable at all, and there are many valid reasons. There are even some edge cases. For example, DaVinci Resolve actually runs better with NVIDIA, even on here. It doesn't support hardware encoding, to my knowledge, on AMD GPUs, so even on some edge cases, NVIDIA will be expected of you. Actually, since I mentioned compute and CUDA as a feature, let me do another thing. Let me just shoot down AMD and Intel in the Bronx, because they have their own flaws. Namely AMD, they royally fucked up compute. There's a reason why CUDA is, I don't want to say a monopoly, but it dominates. AMD can't fucking compete. I can count on one hand the people that use and enjoy ROCm. Nobody cares for AMD compute. It's shit. It sucks. And as for Intel, on paper, Intel's fine until you remember that it's still early days, so expect instability. Intel is somehow less screwed on the feature front as AMD. They aren't outright hostile to compute like AMD is, which is just insane. How are you going to get outplayed by a company that's released like 2 or 3 discrete GPUs in the consumer market? Not going to ask that. AMD never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity, but in general, hardware feature-wise, like, another one, AMD is dog shit for productivity. There's no way to, that's not an opinion, just, if you're a Blender artist, don't even bother. If you need compute, once again, don't bother, just get NVIDIA. Like, I can appreciate that, whereas NVIDIA's special Snowflake proprietary driver works 99% of the time, the open source Mesa drivers for AMD and Intel works 100% of the time. I can appreciate that. But once again, the narrative does not frame it like that. Another one, better drivers does not equal in better ray tracing performance. AMD's ray tracing is ass. Drivers don't change that. I just can't come up with any particular real knockdown reason as to why NVIDIA is just shit. I mean, what's the latest one? Here's the latest one. DirectX 12 games run a little bit slower through VKD 3D versus native Windows. I know, that is the end of the world, obviously. Except for the fact that that's also going to be fixed very, very soon. So, and speaking of being fixed very, very soon, Mesa actually is developing an open source NVIDIA driver, so this thing might not even exist within the next 5 years. Hopefully it doesn't. If it doesn't, it's just going to be one-sided, and there will never be a reason to buy any other GPU brand. Unless they lock in. I hope they do. I like competition. But I'm not going to hold my tongue on it.